Hey party people, it's Lycona Dacheechee and welcome to this small tips and tricks guide for Futures Rewritten, better known as FRU. Now there are already plenty of guides out there on how to do this fight, and I'm not going to be going over the mechanics in detail. But what I will go over is stuff that has helped me progress through this fight. Stuff like looking at animations, looking at cast bars, what to pay attention to, how to move, and other little things that you might not have noticed or that could help you in re-clears or clearing this fight for the first time. So let's get started. So on these clock position dodges, as the animation is fading away, you'll see sort of a bright line going through the middle of the pizza slice. Now, if I dodge into the next cone on that line that slowly fades away, I'm going to be right in the center to dodge the other two cones that are popping out next. So rather than sort of guessing like how far you have to move to the left or right, you can just look at that fading line and then like go right to it and then go back to the other one, and you're going to dodge those every time. Then as I'm getting into a different clock spot because the tanks need to swap, or my off tank needs to swap with me, I take a look at the big bright blue thing in the middle or the red thing, and it's either a stack or a spread in the next mechanic. And if you did this Savage fight when Thancred was out, it's pretty simple. Everybody takes a clock spot. If he raises his sword, you run into the middle. You also watch your partner across the way. If they run in, you run in, and then there are two people left standing on the outside, and that will be the safe spot. You'll do this about 900 times before you get it clear, so you're gonna get it down, no problem. When I'm going back to my clock spot, I take a look at the big, either blue or red thing on top of the boss's head, and then it's either a stack or a spread with the pizza slices mechanic. And then I look at the giant blue or red thing on his head at north, and this determines which side we need to get knocked back into. And in this case, it was the thunder side was safe. One thing to know, the safe spots is like north or south. In my case, it was north because through east-west, he'll always slice through the middle with the expanding AoE. And then from north to south, he'll always hit with the knockback AoE. For the tethers, I mean, there's guides out there that are like, if you have this tether, then you go here, if that tether. We just used our eyeballs and just like you flex or that person flex, and it just works every single time, so no need to overthink it. And so this next mechanic is the thunders and fires, and this was probably the hardest one to get around to in phase 1. And I think what really helped out the party was determining who was flexing to where at what point. But instead of looking at the animations on the boss or the lines or the tethers, I would look at the prey markers on the party list, because the prey markers come out about a half GCD faster than the animations, and it just gave enough time for me to react if I had to go to a bad spot. But looking at the preys in the party list and having just a little bit more time to react to go to where I needed to flex to or where I needed to be made all the difference in the world, and we were to get past this mechanic every single time. Another thing to help out is with callouts. So we would call like 1 fire, 2 fire, north is fire fire, south is thunder fire, for example. And that would just help reinforce the idea of where we needed to go in order to handle the mechanic. For the towers, we used the lineup method, which was surprisingly easy for me to like do the maths out in my head. So it was no big deal. I think the thing that would always get us at the very beginning when we were trying to push the phase is like DPS would always leave their towers before they went off. So you have to stay in your towers. You just have to stay in your towers or else it's like blah. And as we progressed the fight more, as we got past Shiva and onto Gaia, we really had to hold DPS here for Thancred, and we had to let his Enrage cast bar get to about the middle of the word burnished here in order to progress the fight, so that way all of our cooldowns would line up and everything. So once your progression gets far enough, you have to hold DPS. And then sometimes we would accidentally kill Thancred early, and it's just a total disaster from here on out. Like, there's places to recover, but it's like hold DPS, let the cast bar get to burnish, and you'll be golden for the rest of the fight. For Diamond Dust here, the best way that we handled it was that we set ourselves up with New North, and New North for us was either on the yellow or the blue markers. So all of us were in our clock positions normally as A was north, and then as soon as the first circle like appeared, that's when we would reorient ourselves to the new north, and that way we would have set positions on this mechanic every single time. It made this mechanic super consistent, not necessarily easy, but just very consistent. One of the other things you notice is that if it's out, or if she's doing an axe kick, we'll go all the way out to the edge and we'll actually place somebody in the first AoE, because there is enough time to either pop sprint or use a gap closer to get back in the middle before that AoE goes off. Also too, when you're watching the cast bar of Axe Kick, once that cast bar is gone, then you can run back in the middle, and the animation for Shiva here is super late, so as soon as that cast bar like disappears, you can run back into the middle and you will not get hit with anything. And it's the same idea with the sliding mechanic, is that when you see her cast bar disappear, that's when you can slide through, because the mechanic's damage snapshot has already gone out. One rule that we created for ourselves after we finished the sliding mechanic was that wherever the whole party ended up, that's where we would take the stack marker. We had a time where some of the melees were trying to get their positionals, but DPS is very lenient in this phase, so we just said put the stack marker on where the stack people came from. Doing mirrors was just about precision and going to the same spot every time. Once you get that down, you're totally good to go with mirrors. Light rampant is a classic mechanic and probably the most difficult to wrap everyone's head around. We were stuck here for a little bit, but as you can see in our party list, we have a macro that we hit every time, so people could kind of know which towers they were going to, and this was all based on our marker setup. What really helped me was I had to make 2 sticky notes because I just couldn't figure out the geometry of where I needed to go. So so 2 people will get the balls on top of their heads. They go to A and C. They need to separate. But I had to write these sticky notes so that way the balls were either at the bottom or the balls were at the top. And I had to see how the configuration happened in order for it to make sense in my head. And once that happened, once I solved it for like both orientations, then I was golden for the rest of this mechanic. One thing to note here is that when you get into your groups, you gotta wait for the second explosion, that one right there. Or else you're gonna break the chains too early and you're gonna die, and it kinda sucks. Then as you're running back in, I check my party list to see if I have a 2 or a 3. If I have a 2, I get into the tower, and then you either go to your clock spots to spread, or stack with your partner at your clock spots. However you guys determine it. One more thing to note, if you get the walkies, or that's what we called them because you literally have the AoEs underneath you, and you're just gonna walk straight across the way to the other side of the stage, and you can see it here. We just line up between our red markers and our blue markers on the other side, and just run straight, and it works out every time. And also another note for people who have the tethers like running to their tower, just completely ignore the AoEs on the walkie people. Even if you're going to get hit by one of the AoEs that are going off, it's more important to get into the tower than it is to like dodge that AoE, because it doesn't do any damage. And we either stack or spread here, and you want to just stay in your clock spot. Stay in your clock spot. I can't tell you how many times we've died to this, which is hilarious, but there you go, stay in your clock spot. At this point, you should get her down to below 20%, and then just keep building up all of your gauges and just doing it that way until she casts the thing, throw some mitts up, and then you'll go into the add phase, I guess you could call it. Once you hit here into the crystals, I think it's just trial and error, but everyone pops their 2 minutes here, and the only things that you want to hit is the light crystals on the edges, and then once all the light crystals are dead, then you hit the one in the center. And it took us a couple of runs to get through this, just because we were all trying to figure out like which crystal to hit and who to help and where do we set up, like who's DPSing what crystal, that type of thing. And it was also exponentially harder because all of these mechanics that you see, sometimes there was a bug where you couldn't see these mechanics, you couldn't see these AoEs, and you just had to dodge it based on timing. So that was a lot of fun. FRU was a lot harder before the end of this phase. But anyway, as you can see here, we are literally just wailing on the middle crystal. If you get that below 50%, you're pretty good. It's up to you whether to build gauge or not, like on that one. It depends on what you guys got going on and how your team is, composited with, how your party's set up. With ultimate relativity here, what helped me was treating this entire mechanic as a single player mechanic. And what I mean by that is, depending on our timer, debuffs, and who got what, and the pattern of the tethers attaching to the towers, it would determine who got which tower. And there are 8 towers and 8 players, so each person gets a tower. and each person is doing every single mechanic just in a different order. So literally the only thing I would do would be to check my timers, check which tower I'm going to, and then do all the mechanics in the order of my debuff bar, and that was pretty much it. So for this next phase, the way that I understand it is that 6 people get timers, and there's going to be certain flex position. We have one person calling out the flex position, and then one person calling out the safe spot for the apocalypse that's coming up next. I won't go over too much of this phase because it just baffles my brain and I just listen to callouts, but I know that I pop sprint right here, and then as the second one goes off, I do an arc run into the middle, and there's this circle right here, this ring, where everyone stands on, and if you're standing directly on this ring, you're going to, the waters that hit on this part will dodge everybody, so. And then we have a third flex position if needed, and we all get into our spots, and that should be the rest of this phase. Sorry I'm not a little bit more detailed on like sort of the tank or the healer mechanics like throughout this, or what the melees do, but I think this fight has a lot of repetition, and really this phase right here is a lot of repetition and a lot of just going through it and seeing it many times until everybody just gets a handle on it. One of the interesting things here is that Shiva will then spawn on either C or A, and you can tell where she spawns on by listening to her dialogue, and her dialogue will actually come from either the C general area or the A general area. And I'm using my markers here as where she's coming from on the platform, but by listening to where her dialogue is coming from in the arena, you know exactly where she's going to spawn. As soon as her wings come out, we run to the middle, and that's when I start popping my tech step, and about right now is when we burn all of our 2 minutes when both of the bosses are up. There's tons of different ways to do this, but we had supports up north and DPS south, and we each lined up, and depending on who got what, we flexed to our positions. One of the things that's super important is that the crystal up north has appeared at this point, and you don't want to hit it at all. So when you're spreading out like this, you can't spread out north if you're near the crystal. You have to spread out sort of lengthwise away from that crystal. And throughout this phase, you got to keep their health even. So Shiva appears first, and then once Gaia appears, everyone in the party focuses DPS on Gaia, and then you just have to like keep tabs on either one of them. I usually focus target Shiva at the very beginning, and then when I switch to Gaia, it's like I can gauge like how their health is and how to keep their health similar. You just tab target back and forth. Next is crystallized time, and to be honest, we practiced this on other platforms and then we came back, but what helped us out with that is just learning and seeing and really studying where to go and what to do and what to hit. One of the things that has helped me with like positioning is that instead of looking at the animations of the mechanics, look at the AoEs on the ground. And when the AoEs on the ground disappear, that's when you go to your spot or go to your position that you need. And it gives you so much more time. If you're doing this mechanic and you're relying on the animations in game, you are going to be too late to get to where you need to go. When we finally made it successful through crystallized time, it probably took us about 10 or so runs to get to that phase and practice that phase, and then eventually we got there and cleared it. So expect about that, but also if you practice it in a way, then the amount of time that you'll spend on getting there is just going to be so much more efficient, and so that's all I can kind of say about that. Once you get through crystallized time and you go here, what you want to do is you want to point your camera towards north, because I actually had my camera pointed south one time, and then when your abilities come up and the boss is targetable, it flips your camera around and you can't like see the boss, so then you have to turn your camera around. DPS check is pretty solid. You'd have to just give yourself every single advantage that you can while this cutscene is going on. Now, one of the most trickiest mechanics is Exalines, and the thing that helped me and the entire party was that once you see Exalines for the first time, there's going to be a ton of like stuff that you gotta see. But what you want to concentrate on is the arrows. So first I kind of look at the jewel and then orient myself towards the north with like the top of the jewel pointing up north, and then I wait for the glowy X-lines to happen, and then look for the arrows. And for each of these arrows, they only appear the first time the X-lines are coming at you. So you know when the next X-lines are going to come up, and you know when to line up to the next X-lines because you're going to look at the arrows. And here's how I do it. Okay, X-lines are coming out, I look for the jewel, I orient my camera towards north, the right sides are glowing up, I look for the arrows, I get lined up. Arrows, the first ones happen, wait, dodge, look for the arrows, wait, go in, dodge, look for the arrows, wait, dodge. Then you gotta get into your party groups and sort of follow the X-lines. Like, it's a scary one right here, but you have to have your party past the little nub in the middle in order to take the laser beam hits properly. And once you do that 3 times, it's a clear, so congratulations on it. And I really do hope that these little tips and tricks like help you out or gets you to see something a little bit different with the mechanics that are going on. And you know, I am just extremely happy because I remember starting guides and doing guides like, you know, when Shadowbringers first came out, which was like 6 years ago. And since then, and since like the last couple of years, the entire community has been doing such an amazing job just of doing a whole bunch of guides so people can clear, and that's what I like to see, and that's what makes me happy. So, and our team used a ton of guides from world progression first groups, optimizations, friends of ours who cleared before us. So that just makes me happy. I'm just glad that, everyone is here, and hopefully some of these tricks in here can help you and your team kind of see mechanics a little bit differently, kind of like focus in on them, help you out with like a timing or something like that, and then help your party get a clear. So that's kind of all I want, and I hope you guys stay safe out there, and keep on raiding, keep on progressing, keep on keeping on, So until next time, keep on adventuring.